We're back with CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford and attorney Miguel Estrada, who knows what it's like to be at the center of a congressional fight over a president's judicial nomination. His nomination to the D.C. Court of Appeals was blocked by the Senate Democrats in 2002. Jan, I'm going to start with you, though. What kind of a jurist is Merrick Garland, and we know the Senate Republicans were going to block whoever the president nominated. Has it changed now that he's actually nominated someone?
Not in the short term. It hasn't changed. The calculus, they were going to block whoever the president, as Senator McConnell said early on, would come up. That said, I think this pick puts Senate Republicans in perhaps the smallest possible corner, because he really is the best pick that a Republican Senate could hope for from a Democratic president. I mean, as a justice, I think we have to assume that he will be much like he is as a judge. And on that D.C.-based federal appeals court, now in his 19th year, he's been pretty restrained, cautious, not someone who's going to swing for the fences and try to remake the law as a justice, but nonetheless a solid liberal vote. And that's why Republicans are dug in for now, because his nomination still would change the balance of the court. By replacing Justice Scalia, that Supreme Court would be 5-4 liberal, potentially, for a generation.
Miguel, what do you make of the Republican strategy to just block?
Well, look, let me get started with my view, which is to say, when the president puts somebody who is a qualified person, the Senate should give him a hearing and get him through. And I think Judge Garland is astronomically qualified and should be confirmed. The strategy is a political strategy,
yes,
and it made enormous sense for Leader McConnell to do before the announcement, because it forced the White House to come to the table and put on the table the best qualified person that is the most attractive to the Republican Party. If the party were 20 points ahead in the polls and we were united behind a Republican nominee who was clearly conservative, this strategy might continue to make sense. Everybody knows that that's not the case, and when we come to the primaries in June, and it's clear that at best we're going to have a messy, contested convention, I think there will be a number of Republican senators who will take a second look at this and say, it's a high-quality person, we should give him a hearing and confirm him.
I mean, I think you can't assume that say, President Clinton, if she's going into the Oval Office, would even renominate Merrick Garland. He's a 63-year-old white guy, not the kind of home run that these liberal groups had hoped for. And so the argument, to Miguel's point, is that Republicans could well realize that they're going to get a liberal flamethrower come January, and they better confirm this now. I think that's why the calculus could very well change in the months ahead.
Miguel, is there any, you mentioned the distinction, a crucial one between law and politics. Is there any legal or constitutional basis, though, in saying the president can't nominate somebody, or if they nominate him, we're not going to listen to him?
Well, I think the latter. I mean, the latter is clearly okay under the Constitution. All Article 2 says is that the president may nominate and needs the affirmative consent of the Senate to appoint. And if the Senate fails to do anything whatsoever, that is not the consent that the Constitution contemplates, and therefore the person cannot be appointed. There is nothing in the Constitution that says that the Senate has to have hearings or a vote. And if there were, then the filibuster, which we have had for years and years, would have been unconstitutional.
And
now, we all know
this man would have been a federal appeals court judge right now, because Democrats filibustered his nomination to the D.C.-based federal appeals court. And President Obama, if you remember, for Justice Alito, voted to block. So it's the Senate gets to advise and consent.
Where do you think this puts us, Jan, in the politicization of Supreme Court picks? Is this in keeping with, or a big break from?
No, I mean, I think that this has long been politicized. I mean, the Judiciary Committee is like the Hatfields and the McCoys. I mean, you look back for the last 30, 40 years, and this has been a bitter battle. These are the most senior members of the United States Senate, and they are dug in. I mean, this is a separate point, but I think you have to give Republicans, in some ways, a lot of credit for being honest about what they're doing. Instead of putting the nominee through the charade of a hearing and trying to dig up personal attacks, to vote them down, they're saying, no, this is not about Merrick Garland, this is about the process. Say, for example, when Miguel Estrada was nominated by President Bush, they went through this kind of charade, Democrats did, of personal attacks. Instead of saying, we're not going to confirm President Bush's nominees, we don't want them to be on the Supreme Court someday. So at least in this sense, Republicans are being honest.
We have about 20 seconds. The notion, go ahead, did you want to
No, all of that is ancient history. I mean, it seems to me that as a people, we need to focus on where we go to now. And when we have a bid from the president, who is probably the best qualified person that a president of any party could have picked, the party who rules the Senate ought to take it seriously. And as a political calculation, give this a fair hearing.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for both of you.